Thank you all so much for coming, especially on a Saturday. I know you have lives, unlike me. Now you may all be wondering why you're here. The society was started by a few of us in Cambridge quite recently. The idea being to give students an outlet from which they can express their views about Singapore constructively. Right? Now, there's a lot of benefit to having students thinking about these sorts of issues. For one thing, it will be our time soon to make these decisions, and if we're not engaging now, we never will, not at a level that we should be. Right? For the benefactors, right? It's about independent thought. Right? We're a group of people who aren't necessarily tied into institutional systems. My favorite illustration of this is the example of the rolling suitcase. I think a lot of you have heard this example. I've used it endlessly because it is my absolute favorite. So you would think that putting a suitcase on wheels is something that people knew to do from the very beginning. It's not. The rolling suitcase was only actually invented in 1972. Now, to put that into perspective, that is 3 years after man landed on the moon. And then we decided, oh, actually, it's a bit hard to carry my luggage. And not only that, the first rolling suitcase was a trunk with 4 casters on either corner. It was described as walking a drunken dog. And it was a pilot in the 80s who made his fortune by realizing, oh, what if I turned it on its side and put a little telescopic handle on it, make it easier to carry about? Right? Now, he was not from a luggage company. He was a pilot. He used this product every day, and he could see where the flaws were. He could see how it could be best used. And I think you all as students, before you've entered the job market, before you find yourself stuck in an institutional structure, it's good to be coming up with these ideas. Right? Now, about our first project, and of course the reason why you're all here. Some of you will already have talked to me or are on the society. Some of you are, new to this crowd here. Some of you are just here to listen. So it's a chance for everyone to touch base, to mingle with each other, to know from what perspective we start. The SBF, from which Esther comes today, is the apex business chamber in Singapore. Now, they were started to represent the interests of the business community. Right? It was sort of a copycat of something they had in Japan, where it was a way to represent business interests overseas. Now, partly because Singaporean companies are the ones who pay to keep the SBF running, their role has somewhat evolved. And now the SBF has become an organization that does a great deal to serve the needs of those businesses and not just necessarily represent them. Now, thanks to a very wonderful gift from the Far East organization, the Federation has started the Singapore Business Federation Foundation. Now, this foundation has to necessarily tread a very fine line. On one hand, they need to be supporting the interests of businesses, right, providing a service to them. But at the same time, the foundation is there to serve philanthropic aims. So, what is the best way to do that? Now, a long time ago, we understood that the Singapore Business Foundation, with its penetration, with its resources, would be an amazing platform for and to advocate corporate social responsibility. And now with the foundation, there's some meat to this endeavor. Now, the Singapore Business Federation works with the Singapore Compact. Now, this is where it gets a bit sticky, so I'll just go through it as quickly as possible. Now, the Singapore Compact does an amazing job of researching corporate social responsibility in Singapore, defining what it should be, but they have, as is proper to their role, been very neutral between different conceptions of what good CSR is. Right? And because of manpower restraints and other issues, they haven't necessarily been out in the field, as it were. Now, what we want to do here, in cooperation with the SBF, is to put forward best practices for what we feel CSR should be in Singapore. Now, companies then, it's up to them whether or not they want to adopt it. Now, very briefly, because there are subject matter experts here who can tell you much more. So, I'll talk for a little bit about the CSR landscape in Singapore. Now, For a lot of the CSR that you will see every day is companies sending out volunteers, or companies donating a portion of their profits for philanthropic aims. Now, that is a great thing. That companies are already thinking about this is a great thing. But it is not necessarily the most sustainable way to do things. I work with a particular organization that does an event every 6 months where they send members of the group around to homes and to the underprivileged, but they find that after that day is over, that's it. Often they don't go back to the same groups. There's no relationship, there's no sustainable development in that respect. Now, what we're going to ask corporations to do, hopefully, is to take a longer-term view, something in Singapore that we're very, very good at. We love to think 20 years into the future. Right? And in building a better relationship between businesses and the workforce, we're asking corporations to put meat behind, I used this phrase before, put meat behind this idea that the futures of business in Singapore are intrinsically tied to the futures of the working class here. Right? That we have to support our communities to be successful as a country. Right? Some corporations certainly do very bad things when they're blind to this long-term view. It's very easy to think that shareholder interests are, the god of all things. Right? I argue they're not. The London Business School recently wrote a report where they said that companies that believe that social responsibility is a part of their operations and a part of their core beliefs tend not just to do better in the PR sphere, they also tend to do better financially. Right? And that's because CSR is not an and/or, it is an and. CSR can be good for your business. Right? Now, the fact is that companies that are good at what they do also tend to be good at doing good. We want to push companies to play to their strengths, to conduct CSR according to their core competencies. When Save the Children wants to deliver water to war-ravaged parts of Africa, they don't have their own logistics network, they don't even go to a logistics company. They go to Coca-Cola, right? Because Coca-Cola is good at what they do. Right? We want people to be... General Mills is another fantastic example, one of my absolute favorites. Now there was a PR or HR manager who found himself one day packing food into cardboard boxes so it could be shipped from the east coast of the United States all the way out to Africa. And he thought, why are we doing this? I have 100 boxes here, and that's great, but that's going to last, what, all of a few days? He went to his boss and he said, look, this isn't working. Our core strength is food chain management. 1/3 of all food in Africa rots in the stores. Why can't we bring that expertise to governments, to people, to smaller businesses there? It's exactly what they did. Right? We think Singaporean companies can and should do the same. Right? I think that's it for me. I'd like to introduce Bernice Ahn. Now, she's from a company called Xerox Labs, Sean as well. Now, they do research into topics, amongst which is poverty in Singapore. Now, part of what we're hoping to do is identify those beneficiaries who can benefit from CSR in this area. So, without further ado.